we've got the bottom laid down on 3 horses, and the center horse is higher than the 2 at either end, and that's giving us that strange reverse curve to the bottom. I am now traveling down. We've got this story pole, and it runs the length of the bottom, and it has all the information marked out for the widths of the boat. And I'm going to make all those marks. I'm using this is a giant right angle guide. I've marked the location of our props, which are going to prop to this overhead beam and hold the bottom in that proper bend. And I've got various stations, we would call them, outside Japan, elsewhere, and I line this up, and this station at this point, the boat is 3.48 shaku wide, so I find the 348 mark on this side, I make a mark, that's the width of the boat on that side, 3.48 is the width on this side, and so on. And then we'll connect the dots, we'll put a flexible batten around the boat to get the curve, draw the curve, cut the curve, and then, you know, the bottom is cut to shape. We made molds, these cross-sectional shapes of the boat, and they are going to get set up on the bottom, propped overhead, fixed tightly in place, and they define the shape of the hull. That is a European, North American, Western boat building method. In Japan, we would be holding the planks, and obviously we can clamp our planks to those molds, and they hold them at the proper angle and height. In Japan, a boat builder would just hold the planks in place with props. Propping to the floor, propping to the walls, propping overhead, but our space, we're completely handicapped working in that way because we have a concrete floor that's too slippery. We only have one wall because the building's so wide. We have no real overhead. We had to put this center beam in, so this is all we have to prop against. So we just cannot build in that way. And so the mold thing is something obviously I'm familiar working with, and even though I'm familiar with the Japanese method, it just makes more sense to use the molds in this case. Just another thing, Japanese boat builders, we talk in the West about stations, cross-sectional, what would an architect say? Not an elevation, but sections. Cross-sections of the hull where you have all the information for the shape of the boat. Boat builders in Japan typically use just 3 stations. In the West, we have a tradition of many, many, many more stations to define the shape of the hull. And in almost every case, they're equally spaced. In Japan, the spacing is done differently. Most typically, there is a section with known dimensions at the widest beam of the boat. And then the forward and after stations, their location is one of the boat builder's secrets. So we derived 9 points, cross-sectional measurements, the length of the bottom to give us our curve shape. And I've laid these out and now driven a nail into all those points, and then we get a batten. One small detail, Japanese boat builders like to use a batten that is the same thickness as the planking material, which would be a huge batten working in the West, much larger than I was ever used to. But the thinking is, they don't want the batten to bend any more than the planking can bend. So it's actually a pretty smart, pretty smart practice. So we have quite a stiff batten. So I'm gonna pin it up against our marks. And now the key is to sight down the batten and look for what boat builders call a fair curve. This is not a radius of any kind. I missed one mark right there. It's not a radius, it's a parabolic curve. And so we're just looking for something that is smooth, it transitions smoothly, and no bumps in it, no hollows in it. And really, to look at it, you've got to sort of travel around the curve with your eye. In fact, an old-fashioned technique for this was to bend over and look at it upside down. And that did two things. It got your eye closer to it. It's better to get your eye down close to it and look at it. And this is a true thing. When you look at it upside down, your brain doesn't register anything else because the world is upside down. And it really removes distraction. You can really see that, feel that, that if you focus just on the batten, just on the thing you care about. So this is boat number 4. So in fact, we have refined these dimensions building the previous boats. So this looks good from the get-go. And I can feel pretty confident, just lay down the dimensions that we now have and put the batten on it and draw the curve. And we will have what we want. So it's going to do that. So right here is the base of the stem. And this is probably this is the spot we really had to fuss with the most. So, oh. Okay. Whoop. Look at that. That winds up working out. So our pattern's a little off. Okay, so that's it. So the next step is cutting this to shape, and we don't cut it at a 90 degrees. We cut at the angle that our first plank is lays against the hull. And we have done some careful measuring, and that changes from 36 degrees to 38 to 40 to 38 to 36 to 33. And I'm going to change the angle of the saw as I go. And hopefully we get, and again, as we've built more boats, we've dialed in those angles to get those just right. So we get a nice fit between the side plank and the bottom.